morning, colleagues, and good morning, everyone. I now note that the hour has come. Ms. McDonald, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate that you are present when your name is called.
Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember Squilla.
Present.
Councilmember Phillips. Councilmember Gaudier.
Present.
Councilmember Lozada.
Present.
Councilmember Thomas. Councilmember Harity.
Here.
Councilmember O'Rourke.
Present.
Councilmember Young. Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Present.
Public Safety Chair Jones.
Present.
Chair Driscoll.
Present. Thank you. A quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is now called to order. This is the joint public hearing of the Committees on Licensing and Inspection and Public Safety regarding Resolution Number 250052. Ms. McDonald, will you please read the title of the resolution?
Resolution number 250052, authorizing the Committee on Licenses and Inspections and the Committee on Public Safety to hold hearings on enforcement against drug paraphernalia stores.
Before I ask the clerk to call the first panel, I would like to recognize the sponsor of the resolution, our Council Majority Leader, Catherine Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much to Chairman Driscoll and Chairman Jones and all of the colleagues present here today for joining us regarding this really important issue across the entire city of Philadelphia. We are continuing to see grocery and convenience stores pop up in our neighborhoods with the promise to sell food. However, the majority of items that these stores sell are drug paraphernalia. Even more troubling is the fact that many of these convenience stores are not properly zoned or licensed to sell drug paraphernalia and lack community approval. Not only are they breaking the law, but they often serve as hubs of illegal activity and crime. Throughout my time here as a member of this legislative body, I have worked to address quality of life issues and nuisance businesses. And I want to take the moment to thank Council Members Bass and Phillips for their continued work on this issue as well. In 2021, I passed legislation, Bill number 210159, that updated the definition of drug paraphernalia in our code for the first time in more than 40 years. This legislation empowered the city's law department, licenses and inspections, and other departments to adequately enforce against the law and hold these nuisance businesses accountable. In 2023, I passed Bill number 230569 to strengthen the city's nuisance abatement plan so we can have more leverage to seize business operations and to establish stronger cases if cease operation orders are challenged in court. However, as I've mentioned before, the more we try to hold these bad actors accountable, the more creative they get in circumventing the law. Additionally, I have done tours across our city with my colleagues and our partners in the administration, including licenses and inspection, the health department, law department, and our Philadelphia Police Department. And we have seen firsthand the lengths that some of these businesses will go through to circumvent the law. In fact, we all have seen it in our communities. So many of our colleagues here today have introduced or supported legislation to hold these bad actors accountable. And that's why today's joint hearing between Council's Committees on Licenses and Inspections and Public Safety is so important. I look forward to hearing from our partners in the administration on what is currently being done, and I'm eager to hear from the community to learn more about how these nuisance businesses are impacting the lives of everyday Philadelphians. However, there is one thing that I know for sure. Upon the conclusion of today's hearing, we must address this issue once and for all. Thank you.
Well, Leader Richardson, thank you for your leadership on this. I remember when I was in the House of Representatives, you and I toured Frankfort Avenue and Tarsdale Avenue and Cottman Avenue in Northeast Philadelphia, and you were very aggressive then, and you haven't given up on this. So, I just want to commend you for sticking with this such important issue. And before we move on, I want to recognize Chairman Jones, our Public Safety Chairman. Chairman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank publicly the author of the legislation, Member Gilmore Richardson. It wasn't that long ago that you and I walked up 54th Street with D. Dukes and others and walked into one of the local establishments, and I said, well, what is that? and it was a gambling machine. And that was the first time I ever saw one of those gambling machines, and was taken aback as to, well, who are they licensed by, and who actually keeps account of the payouts, and who keeps track of where they're located, and the answer to all of that was nobody. But as you mentioned, member, that when Cindy Bass introduced legislation about liquor by the drink, when many of us have had to deal with Lucy cigarette sales, when many of us have had paraphernalia in stores and drugs actually sold behind counters, these things create what I think is a watering hole effect. A watering hole effect. When you look at some of the nature shows and the gazelle creeps down to get water that it needs, right? It's lions hiding in the tall grass to snatch them up. Well, when you put all of these toxic elements in one store, a location, it creates that watering hole effect, and predators look at that as an opportunity to take advantage of people. Now, I admire the work that the Nuisance Business Task Force does, but I need to get more clarification as to when a business, along with paraphernalia, along with Lucy's, along with illegal drinking, becomes that nuisance, and what the progressive steps we can take to shut them down. Because it's not one thing, it's many things. It's, does the health department come in and get the back of L&I? And in that task force approach, they know that you're not going to get away with just any old thing in our neighborhoods. And so I look forward, Mr. Chairman, I look forward, members of the committee, to seeing what some of those answers are. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and I'm glad we're working together, our both committees here, because it's that important. Member Harity?
To just thank everybody for having this hearing and coming. I would like to know out of this is how do we fix it like everybody else? I spent 6 years as Chief of Staff to Senator Street. We passed numerous bipartisan legislation because the takeout stores were so bad everywhere. It wasn't just a Philadelphia thing. We were able to get everybody to agree to pass this stuff, and I thought that was going to change the narrative of how we were able to enforce and shut down these nuisance establishments. But apparently it's not working because we still have them everywhere. I mean, in my neighborhood and almost every neighborhood I travel to. I've been all over the city this weekend alone, and these places are everywhere. The paraphernalia stores are just disgraceful, and you know, I don't even want to get into the stores that we have in our neighborhood where they have about 5 bottles of soda and 6 bags of chips, and they're supposed to be a grocery store, and you got 6 guys in there selling other stuff rather than groceries. So I thank Kathy Gilmore, for our leader, for bringing this subject to the forefront. And I look forward to getting some answers on how we can make it easier to enforce these type of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Harity. Ms. McDonald, will you please call the first panel we have to testify on resolution number 250052?
Bridget Collins Greenwald, available for questions, are representatives from the Philadelphia Police Department and the Department of Health.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Just please state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
You're ahead of me because I'm still in morning time, council member. So, good morning, Chairperson Driscoll, Chairperson Jones, and members of the License and Inspections and Public Safety Committees. My name is Bridget Collins Greenwald, and I serve as the Commissioner of Licenses and Inspections Quality of Life. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today on Resolution Number 250052, introduced by Councilmember Gilmore Richardson, which authorizes the Committee on L&I to hold public hearings on enforcement against illegal drug paraphernalia stores. I'm joined here today by my colleague Renee Reinhardt, the newly appointed permanently Director of Code Enforcement, yes, right? It's so exciting. An expert on all things zoning, drug paraphernalia, and licensing. The Drug Paraphernalia Enforcement Program was launched in 2021 after Bill Number 210159 became law. It is a citywide initiative designed to address the illegal sale of drug paraphernalia by local businesses. This program is not only a regulatory measure, but a vital public safety effort aimed at reducing crime and improving the quality of life of our communities. Since the inception of this program, L&I has conducted hundreds of thorough investigations and inspections in collaboration with our city partners in the Police Department and the Department of Health. These efforts have resulted in the issuance of notices of violation and full or partial cease operations orders. We have found that in many cases, store owners are willing to comply and were previously unaware of the city's regulations. In these instances, stores remove the drug paraphernalia and remain open and operational. We remain committed to working closely with the City Council, the Department of Public Health, the Philadelphia Police Department, and the community to address these challenges and ensure the continued success of our enforcement program. We are also eager to work on increasing public awareness of these laws to reduce misunderstandings and help store owners avoid unknowingly operating in violation. Thank you once again for the opportunity to testify today. We welcome any questions you may have and look forward to collaborating further in our shared mission to make Philadelphia safer and healthier. Thank you. She's not read testimony for just for
That was a joint
questions.
testimony there?
Yeah, is that okay?
Very
I mean,
good.
unless you want to say.
Very good. Yeah, so we'll get right into questions. And let me start with our leader first, Catherine Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Commissioner, and it's good to see Renee, and congratulations on the new role, and just want to thank the Nuisance Business Task Force for all the work that you all have done over the last 3.5, 4 years now, and especially thankful for all of the tours that we've gone on together. As the chairman mentioned previously, I remember in the last term, we had one tour in particular, and I think that was in now Councilmember Young's district, before you were the council person, where the folks who were selling additional illegal things surrounded us outside of that store that had no licensing at all. And that was one of the most prolific examples of why we need to continue to address this issue. So I wanted to just ask a couple of questions regarding the process, so that we can get it on the record. If you could just walk us through what happens when a business is caught selling illegal paraphernalia, and then typically how do we, is it that we receive the complaint regarding the business, and then that's the trigger for L&I to then go out and initiate the inspection, and then what happens from there?
Yes, all of our complaints, well, the majority of our complaints come via 311. Once we receive...
I'm sorry, just
Oh,
state
I'm
your name for the
sorry.
record, that's all.
Sorry.
Yes.
Renee Reinhardt. We receive most of our complaints via 311. Once the inspector receives the complaint, they will research the location before going out to see what their legal zoning is. They'll do a physical inspection. If they identify that the business is selling drug paraphernalia, they will have a conversation with the operator or whomever is on site, identifying the items that are paraphernalia and telling them that they are not allowed to sell them without a zoning permit. And then an immediate cease operations will be issued for the sale of the paraphernalia only if the store has some other legal operation. And it's usually retail sales of consumer goods or food, beverages, and groceries. So the store will be able to continue to operate.
So the store will be able to continue to operate as long as they remove the drug paraphernalia while the inspector's on site?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So they'll issue the cease operations and they'll be told that they have to immediately stop selling the paraphernalia. It is not always the case that they'll remove it right on the spot. The inspector will return within 30 days to make sure that the paraphernalia is removed and lift the cease operations.
Okay, and lifting of the cease operation only occurs if in the second inspection, the drug paraphernalia has been removed.
Yes.
Okay, and then to that effect, what are we doing with the repeat offenders? As an example, the same instance that I referred to previously, we had the same business owner. And so at the point when we were on our way to the next store, which happened to be on North Broad Street, they had already called the store from the last store that had no licensing at all. Like the first store had no licensing whatsoever to operate. They were selling food. They didn't have a health license. They had nothing. And so they were issued a cease operation on the spot because they had no licensing to even operate as a store. But because the same individual owned or ran multiple locations in that community, at the point when we got to the next location, they had already tipped them off, and then they had removed, you could tell they had removed like all of the drug paraphernalia. How are we dealing with the folks who are repeat offenders that, you know, they'll open an LLC under one name and then open another LLC under another name? How are we dealing with those folks?
So we found that during the course of the program, we've had 30 repeat offenders, and the repeated offense was at least 3 months or more between the previous inspection and the new one, so the process starts over. So we will keep track of the fact that this store is selling drug paraphernalia again, but at that point, it doesn't escalate to us sending you to court because you're selling paraphernalia again.
Because it's under a new name, so, but it's the same location.
Yes.
So that, for me, I look at that as a legislative opportunity for council, for us to address in further legislation how to deal with a location versus dealing with just the name of the said business, because we know it's the same location, and 9 times out of 10, it's the same people. So if we deal with a location versus dealing with just the business name, that could give us additional leverage. So I'm looking at that as a legislative opportunity for follow-up for my team and I. And then lastly is, I know my colleagues have a ton of questions. Are we still keeping track of the Google Drive that we have? Can we still add businesses and business complaints to that drive when we receive them in council?
Yes.
Okay. And then could we give access to all of the offices to the drive, or how do you want us to do that? I think it was, right, can we give access?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll come back around.
I'd like to recognize Chairman Curtis Jones.
Thank you so much, and very good inquiries, Majority Leader. I mentioned the water hole effect. Do we keep track of, and how do we keep track of, that all of these preponderance of issues, whether it's liquor by the drink, drug paraphernalia, all of that stuff, is there a correlation to what happens when crimes happen at these same locations? And that, you know, with all of that going on, is that something that we can add to the matrix of evaluation as to this location being a dangerous watering hole, and that for a period of time, unless certain things happen and ownership changes and things like that, that we need to hold back their licenses because people's lives are in danger? There are sites, and we started keeping track of it with the gambling machines, where, you know, the correlation of somebody was shot, but there was a gambling machine inside that they were, and we're talking about from police officers to victims to, that there is a correlation with these bad activities that go on at a location that attract the predatory response of crime. And do we manage that in our expectation of a nuisance business?
We do work collaboratively with the nuisance unit of the police department. We go hand in hand. We're out with them all the time on these different various topics that you're talking about, the drug paraphernalia, the machine, all of them. So when we have a nuisance business, we go out full force, hand in hand. So yes, we do coordinate with them.
So what is the tipping point of how many shootings have to happen at a place, or robberies have to happen at a place before us to say, oh my goodness, it might be the location?
I'm going to ask Deputy Commissioner Healy of the PPD to come up. I don't want to speak for the police department, so.
Hey, Deputy Commissioner, how are you?
Good morning, Fran Healy, Deputy Commissioner, Philadelphia Police Department.
Pull that mic a little closer.
Good morning. The question is, the question 9400.
It's that wire you got on.
How about we- Can't hear.
Can't hear you.
Can we switch seats? How about we just switch seats?
Try it.
Try again. Good morning, Fran Healy, Deputy Commissioner, Philadelphia Police Department. To answer your question as to the number of shootings, if you recall, under 94400, it was recently amended actually to carve out critical nuisances versus chronic nuisances. Critical nuisance is any single incident of active violence, shooting, homicide, a rape, anything along those lines automatically creates a critical nuisance. A nuisance, and what that triggers is it triggers a preliminary investigation by our neighborhood nuisance enforcement unit. That unit will go out to determine whether or not the business had any nexus or connection with the incident that happened, either doing something illegal or not illegal, but whatever it may be. They take an overall view to see whether or not, number one, the business owner is cooperative with police, whether or not there's proper lighting, whether or not they contributed to the crowd or anything along that may have actually precipitated the violence. If that's the case, then that case will follow the course of a critical nuisance, and an immediate and notice of intent to cease operations will occur. All other incidents are considered chronic nuisances. That would be repeated acts of any city code violation would be one of them. Also, public disorderly conduct, any of those crowds. It's 3 incidents within a year would classify it as a chronic nuisance, and the chronic nuisance would then be elevated to, once you hit the 3rd violation within a year, you would be subject to a notice of intent violation. That's the premise of 94400.
So is there room, based on Member Richardson's idea, that not just to the license, but to the location, and that we put a freeze on that type of location for a period of time to kind of, in effect, cool things down in the neighborhood? That, okay, if we're working together and, okay, my license got stopped, I just open up in your license and we're back in operation within a couple of weeks. Can we say this location needs to be looked at for factors that are contributing to the waterhole effect of crime? And I just think that, there's a geography of crime, that where things happen is not just what happens there, It's where they happen at, and there's a preponderance of opportunity when you create this watering hole. And so, I'm not to go on my soapbox, but there's a senior citizens facility out at 56 and I'm gonna say Arch. And they won't go to a corner store because they're aware of the water hole effect, and that during any time, not just at night, during any time, they are vulnerable because of that location. So they have to steer away from that area because of the actors. In the case where we were at 54th Street, you'll probably hear from later testimony, that is the hangout. That is the spot now. And that is the central headquarters for bad things to happen. And so locations as well as licenses should be considered, is my point. What do you think? You got a mic?
I think, well, in the bigger context of how businesses elude their responsibilities are, how they change ownership. The issue is one LLC is considered a person legally, and when they close that corporation, open a new one, it's a brand new organization, technically. So the issue is, I think, and that's the game they play. They play this with the liquor code all the time. The same thing with liquor license establishments, changing the primary people, just get a new LLC, but it's the same people that basically run it, but it's under a new name. I think if you want to get to that, you probably have to get into something along the lines of like what IRS regulations have, where you're taxing ownership. The issue is if a substantial number of the same people own the next company, then for all intents and purposes, it's the same company, and all penalties and fines should apply to that new company as well. I mean, that may be something to consider to avoid the shell game, is really what they do. Trying to figure out how to avoid them from playing that shell game. As I said, like if I have one LLC and it's party A, B, and C, and the next shell game because they've got all these notice of intent to cease, they've got all these fines against them, they suddenly close, go out of business, and then they open and sell the business to the next corporation and have the same players that own it. That's effectively the same company, and all they're doing is playing a shell game. So I think you would figure out how do you tax or tack the violations from the one corporation onto the next corporation, and that would be something that it would probably address what you're talking about, because that's what happens. It's the same corners, but different businesses doing the same things.
So I'm familiar with that approach and want to explore that. What I am talking about, there used to be a notorious bar called Long Acres. You got to be a certain age to know what that is. And that's where all of the young guys that were underage drinkers used to get the old heads to go in and buy their you don't know what I'm talking about. All right, but anyway, Jimmy does, right? But this was that spot, and from time to time, people would get murdered there, and people would get shot there, and people would get robbed there. At some point, you gotta say, no matter who owns this location is toxic. It is a problem, and so I would love to have us look at location-based activities that might come into our view that says, no, this is just a bad place for a bar. And let us look at it. So I appreciate your answer, but we're going to try to find some other relief from this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner, too. I know Member Jimmy Harity, and then Member Lozada.
Mike.
I'm far away over here. I'll move up. How's that? All right. Commissioner, we have found that in many cases, store owners are willing to comply and were previously unaware of the city regulations. In these instances, stores remove the drug paraphernalia and remain open and operational. How can we, A, better publicize what is allowed and what isn't allowed, and in that same thing, how do we distinguish between the actors? So, you know what I'm saying? So, basically, how do we help you do your job better so that we can get rid of the businesses that are not. And listen, to be honest, I see it every day. You know, businesses don't just open up, like in cases of my neighborhood, they have good intentions. But then they have to deal with, like the councilman said, the area. You know, right on my block, on the top of my street, I have more than a few stores within a block radius, including a takeout beer store, 1, 2, 3, 4 grocery stores within a 1-block area of each other, all of which have some very unsavory characters hanging outside that quite frankly, you know, would scare most people, especially store owners. You know what I'm saying? These guys, especially where, because I agree with Councilman Jones, sometimes it's just that area. You know, there's multiple shootings on that block out front of these places on regular occasion. So my thing is, how do we rectify this situation so that we can, I just don't get why it takes so long to get rid of a bad actor. You know what I'm saying? So can you just like walk us through that and then just try to tell us how you think that we can improve it by legislation?
I'm going to go back to your first question about how do we get the information out there. So we do have a program, which we call our B program. It's Business, Education, and Enforcement. And actually, a lot of you are district council members up here. So we had met with each council member and said, where are the areas that are really giving you the biggest pain point, right? Where are they? 10 out of 10 identified a commercial corridor in their district that said this is where a lot of the stuff is happening. So what we have done is we've gone to those corridors, we've given some education so to let people know this is what you can and cannot do. We've recently discussed, we give like a general information packet. It's in multiple languages, but it's like, it's very, very clear cut, pictures, graphics, do this, yes, can't do this, slashes through them. We've recently discussed, we have a pamphlet on drug paraphernalia, what you can and cannot do. We're gonna start handing that out on the corridors as well. That would get the information piece out. I'm sure working with all your offices too, giving you that information piece. So, you know, when you have meetings or community meetings or whenever you're down, like maybe getting that information out. I think that would help us. I think a lot of times we are seeing, we go into places for a myriad of different issues, and when we go in, the business owner just doesn't know that what they're supposed to do to be in compliance. So we go with them, we sit with them, we talk them through everything, we do that. So that I think would be helpful to your first question. I think your second question was the same as Councilmember Jones, is like, how do we go about picking something up from a location base? Was that what your second question was? Yep. So I think to DC Healy's point, I think we'd have to look into that. We'd have to work with your offices. I think we'd have to talk to the law department to see how that's possible. We all know the same thing about this shell game that's going on. So how do we stop that? So that I do not know the actual answer to. I think we could work with the law department to see if it's legal. I think it's very simple to say, yep, we know this location. It's been owned by A, B, C, D, goes down the line, and it's always, you know, a bad location. What do we do about making sure that it doesn't stay open or reopen or whatever it is? But I don't know if you have anything to add, but I feel like you covered.
No, I think. No, I would agree. I mean, the issue is, I hear you when you talk about place-based issues and trying to identify them. In that discussion, we definitely need to include the law department because the issue of, and this is where the length comes into play. When we start the enforcement action, they have rights to appeal. Then they delay the appeals and things get drug out, and then suddenly in the middle of the appeal, the business is sold and everything changes. It's a game they play. If we can somehow impact how they play that game, to stop them from being able to transfer the ownerships and avoid all the liabilities and accountability, that would be a first step. I mean, there are things, like I said, vaguely familiar with the old IRS regs, but there was a way that the IRS would tack one business to another to avoid this type of stuff. And maybe that's something we would like to take a look at and model to avoid these people playing these shell games within Philadelphia. Because that's exactly what they're doing, and they're doing it in those areas where there is a historical problem. So they do it on purpose.
The chair recognizes Councilmember Ketzi Lozada.
Thank you for being with us this morning. A few questions, because I think that over the last few weeks, we've been talking a lot about businesses, and people are like, well, we're open for business, but you guys are putting all of these barriers in place for businesses to exist. And I want to make sure that people understand that that's not the case, right? I think for a really long time, folks got accustomed to, whether it be because of COVID or whether it be because of a lack of staff, we were enforcing the laws that are in place, right? You know, L&I and the health department both went out with me multiple times into the 7th district to do all of these education campaigns. So for people to say that they don't know or they don't understand, I think that's BS, right? People have gotten accustomed to doing things the way they want to do them, and we are witnessing in our city the results of that, right? The results of people just being able to do whatever the heck it was they wanted to do in their business. We went into a business where a woman had not had her permits or her licenses in place, and an inspector had not visited her for 8 years. And she's serving food. And so this is a problem. We walked into convenience stores where they're selling needles right above candy. This is a problem, right? And so we need to figure out how we hold that location accountable, but also the individual who's running that business. Because if he's a problem on the 3100 block of Kensington Avenue and he moves his business to the 3500 block, or he moves to West Philly, he's gonna be a problem because he knows the system, right? He knows the system. So regardless of where he goes, he's gonna be a problem business person. And so I want to figure out how do we tighten up the process in a way that's going to hold people accountable, that if you're not a good business person, then you shouldn't be conducting business in our city, at least not in my neighborhood, right? I'm sure my colleagues will feel the same way. They don't want this nonsense in their neighborhoods either. But Councilmember Squilla and I were having a conversation. Is it a fact that you all don't confiscate the materials or the product, you have them take it down? And so how is that solving anything? You're taking it down, he's putting it in the back, right? And the minute you all walk away, who's to say that he's not gonna take it back out? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And so how do we become a common sense government that will allow us to continue to enforce and protect neighborhoods?
So to answer your first question, no, we do not confiscate the materials. We do go back for re-inspections, as Renee had said. We found like the ones that are on our radar that we went back, only 14% of them have been a repeat offender. The ones that we've seen, I'm not saying it doesn't exist out there. So the other ones are in compliance. When we go back, the paraphernalia is removed. So whether we can confiscate or not, we told legally we have not. I mean, it's a discussion we can have with the law department, but I know that is something we've been told.
Well, that's a question. So I know when the sports teams do well and there's these pop-up businesses, we do confiscate. Is that because they don't have a business privilege license?
And it's counted, right? The stadium, you want to talk to that, stadium vending?
Or a vendor license? I mean, what's the difference between confiscating there and not confiscating something illegal here?
So I can't say what the difference is right at the moment, but some of the items that people are selling at the vending locations may be counterfeit, and we are allowed to confiscate those items. However, a brick and mortar store, we're not allowed to just go in and remove their items. And that is a direction from the law department.
So that's something, Leader, that we might want to look at, that, the difference between a brick and mortar and a pop-up per se. Maybe there's something we can figure out, Deputy Commissioner, in the legal language. I don't know, just spitballing, but that's what this hearing's for, is to try and come up with some ideas. Member Brooks, Kendra Brooks.
So, someone said, Mr. Chair. Oh, okay. So, my questions are kind of on the same line. So, do you guys track like zip code distribution where you see these things popping up? Or do you see like an influx of these type of establishment in certain areas based on socioeconomic status?
So we've been working with the overall nuisance business committee in the city, so they're tracking things. It's actually being tracked with the Philly Sat 360 program. So we are actually tracking what's going on. There's overlays of what goes on in each area from all different departments, us, the police department, the health department, and I'm not even actually sure exactly who else, but they have all kinds of information they overlay into these maps.
Okay. And then you mentioned that, just for clarity, I know the LLCs, they switch up, but the business licenses, isn't it the same person connected to the business license? Like, there is any way we can like single out, and I don't really understand it around drug paraphernalia, but I know it was a bar at the corner of my block, someone got killed there many years ago. And every time they think they're about to pull that LNI sign and take that door down, I'm on the phone like, this can't happen. And I found out from the police department, they did open it up illegally like a summer or two ago, but they were able to track the person down to multiple bars and businesses that they owned. I don't know what happened after that or how the fining works, but his business license, he had owned multiple businesses, bars, and they were able to attack him that way. Is that the same type of thing that we can do around drug paraphernalia?
That's exactly what we're talking about with that nuisance committee, doing that, linking everything together to like one entity, as you said.
Okay, thank you.
Member Gaudier, and then we're going to go to Member of Work.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I just wanted to comment, and I know that we're in the midst of the budget cycle, but one issue, at least to me, seems to be around capacity. We know, and the community members know, where these nuisance establishments are. It takes way too long to get action in terms of inspections once we reach out to LNI. And then we've also run into an issue where some of these places don't open until late. And I've been told, oh, we don't have anybody, we would have to assign overtime to get an inspector to go out after 4, right? And so some of this seems to be about capacity. If there are nuisance establishments operating all night long on commercial corridors and bringing a nuisance, then we have to be prepared to be able to inspect them when they are open. And so I'd love to hear your response to that, but I will also encourage us this budget season to change that dynamic. Thank you.
So we do have a nuisance property unit that does go out. It goes out on the weekends, it goes out at night. So it goes out when these establishments are operating. We go out with the police department and we go out at night. Every weekend we're out there.
I'm not sure what's going on, but I definitely was given a response that we need to find someone to go out for an establishment that opens after 4. I can show you that communication if need be.
Sure, please do, because that absolutely, we do have a dedicated nuisance property unit that has a supervisor and 5, 6 inspectors that go out. So they're out there. Yeah, so please, if you could share that with me, I'd really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Councilmember Nicholas O'Rourke.
Thank you, Brother Chair. Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning to all. Always nice to see folks. Can you walk us, and I apologize if some of this has already been shared through other questions that have been asked, but could you just walk us through the differences in law or in practice that determine whether a business receives a full or partial cease operations order?
I'm gonna let you do, you're the expert.
So we would issue a partial cease operations if the business has their business licenses and their zoning is appropriate for retail sales of consumer goods or food, beverages, and groceries. That would be a partial cease for the sale of the drug paraphernalia only. A full cease operations mean that the business cannot operate until they correct certain violations. so the store would be closed until they repair their fire alarm. Or if we go for the second time for a drug paraphernalia inspection and they're still selling it, then we would cease the business until they remove and stop selling the paraphernalia.
Okay, and does the question has come up since there's been a lot of focuses around location. Does the department track these complaints and investigations by council district? I'm at large, but I'm sure the district folks probably would benefit from knowing that.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, do you track any of that data by district?
Yes.
Okay. That would be helpful, I think, if we could have that information. Thank you. That's all.
Okay. Chair recognizes Member Jeffrey J. Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. My office gets complaints often about stores that not only just sell the drug paraphernalia, but actually are selling drugs. I've witnessed myself going into stores where people are buying weed, because when I'm not dressed like this, they don't know who I am, right? I've seen stores selling marijuana. I've seen stores selling tobacco products to kids, to 11-year-olds. Literally, I had a conversation with 11-year-olds outside of a store one day. And also in my district, the stores, most of the stores have all their windows covered, right? We know that's a violation of our city code as well. So these things seem to be pervasive in my district, and we just, what can we do that when we get complaints that a store is selling marijuana, what are the options for the community?
We've had multiple times where that's occurred, and that's on the police. If we make an arrest in that store and there's a nexus between either the clerk or the owner with that store, okay, that's a 1926-01 violation. So we go after well, not me, but the Philadelphia Police Department will take the actions through our nuisance unit to direct with L&I directly and the law department, because that's a whole different issue. If you're selling, and we have the nexus now, if they're not the owner or they don't operate the store, we'll make the arrest of the individuals, but then we'll try to get them under a nuisance 9-44. If the business is allowing this type of stuff to happen, even though they're not the owner or manager of the store, they can still be held accountable, but not as a direct arrest for the narcotics. We'll lock up the sellers, et cetera. But the store itself, if I can't find that nexus between the two, then we have to go through the 94400 process to go after the store. But if the store is in fact selling stuff and we catch them, we've done that. And we had in South Philly, we had a case where actually it was a robbery. The individual the clerk got robbed in the store, and when the captain was going through the video, realized that he was selling drugs. The reason he got robbed is because he was selling drugs in the store. We took that, narcotics went, did a couple buys in the store, and we worked together and we got the store shut down.
So you said they did a couple buys. So when we get these complaints, like who can we give that information to so the police can go out and do these undercover investigations to do the buys, right? Because that's how you catch the stores. You have to go in there and buy the product from them. So who do we give that information to?
Yeah, I would use the inspector for our nuisance neighborhood nuisance unit, Inspector Michael O'Donnell. He'll be the conduit and coordinate everything with narcotics and with everything else in the police department.
Thank you. And just for clarity, there are no stepped up penalties for repeat offenders of violations for like the selling drug paraphernalia?
So, in step up, so if we go back to a property and we re-inspect and they're still doing it, we can issue the cease. We have court as an option as well, send things into court, which we do often for a lot of our violations. So that is the next step, the cease, and then we could do court as well.
And when you say you issue your cease, the partial cease ops for the drug paraphernalia, do the store owners know when you're coming back out to re-inspect?
They don't know exactly when we're coming back. They know that we'll be there within a certain amount of time.
Okay, within a certain amount. So they know within that time, don't sell these products within that time. Okay. And when there are, so what are some of the impediments? I know one of my colleagues asked about this earlier, the confiscation of these illegal items, essentially. If they don't have a permit for them, they're illegal. So tell us, or can you talk to us about what are some of the impediments that you all have from confiscating these items?
So we don't confiscate these types of items. The items that we do confiscate, to Councilmember Driscoll's point, was, his statement was, when we do work something like down at the stadiums, or we're doing like vendor stuff, we can confiscate those. We have a warehouse where we put that stuff. So we store that. The person has the opportunity at certain points, if it's their merchandise, to come back to that warehouse and get it. That's a whole process as well. If not, we just dispose of the items.
Yeah, so the question is, I mean, I guess, well, why, right? Why we can confiscate from the small vendors, why are we not confiscating an illegal item that we know is being sold illegally in the brick and mortar store as well?
According to the ordinance, technically, they're not illegal items. They're illegal to sell. So the owner can have them, but he can't sell them.
So, but even with the vendors, they're not illegal items necessarily. They're illegal to sell them, right? And so,
But I believe they don't have a license to sell anything. And also, the other side of that is the counterfeit merchandise gets seized. So it's distinguishable, but I do believe the law department chimed in when the ordinance was passed as to the possession versus the sale.
all right, so I think for
But it's
us
something
as
to revisit.
legislators, we have to change that in our code then.
And point of clarification, some of the drug paraphernalia is kind of hidden in other stuff. So like, if you go into the gas stations and you see them little glass tubes with the roses in them, they're straights for smoking crack. But they put the little rose in them and it becomes a little thing, but they're using them to smoke crack. That's what
And
they're
Mr.
for.
Chair, I have one more question. So, no, you're good. You're good. I mean, we need this information. And I looked at chapter 9, 4400. It talks about the chronic and nuisance businesses. And the code says, I think this is something that us as legislators need to work on as well, but the code says that repeated or continuing violations could count toward being a chronic and nuisance business. But is it possible, I guess, for us as legislators, like, can we get your opinion on it? If one violation could count toward the 3 that's necessary to deem a business a chronic nuisance business within that 12-month period?
Yes, and that was actually one of the main reasons why 944 was amended, I think, 2 years ago, to actually broaden the scope of its power. The issue is, it's like we identified certain violations within this code for the first 3 hits, 3 strikes and you're out, understanding that this is much broader, that there's a lot of other type of violations that could go on, and otherwise the statute would be 14 pages long. Actually, I believe Kristen Bray was the one that designed the actual amendment, said, repeated of any offense. So if we identify repeated offenses of any violation of the code, it can fall under 94400, and we have been using that, yes.
Yeah, that says repeated. I mean, I think that's, but it still only counts. Repeated only counts, would then count as that one instance for the 3. So what I'm suggesting is that maybe that not a repeated or continuing violation, is that the actual violation itself can count toward the one of the 3 that's necessary to be deemed a chronic business. The code says repeated. So for me as a lawyer, I say repeated, I can get away with this multiple times before it counts as a strike against me.
Well, I'll be very honest, we've interpreted that rather liberally. So if you have 1, or if you have 2 or more of the other code violations, we're using that and taking action against you, the nuisance unit. So we are using it liberally, aggressively, I don't know how you want to say it, but we have interpreted it to mean if you do 2 strikes, we're using you at that level and saying you've had repeated violations of X, Y, and Z, and we're moving forward under the 94400. Because it's kind of a catch-all provision in the code, and we use it rather liberally.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair recognizes Vice Chair Mark Squilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to follow up on Councilmember Young's questioning, because we do have the multiple violations for a nuisance business, but what happens after somebody complies? So you have a violation, you comply, you go back for a follow-up visit, there's nothing there, right? But then 6 months later, you go back and there's another violation. Does that count as 2 violations?
It would under us for 94400, yes.
It would?
Yes.
So then that would count if there was the 3rd violation in that period.
Correct. And in the process, if you recall, we put out warning letters by the statute or by the ordinance, we're required to put out warning letters to the business owner. Because a lot of times the business owners may be vacant, or not vacant, but not on premises. But we send letters out to anybody of record that owns or manages that location saying, be advised, you've had nuisance behavior. If you continue this course, blah, blah, blah. And we give out one letter, two letters, and then after the third letter, you also get the notice of violation at that point in time.
But there is still an appeal process after that,
They can
right?
appeal, yes, they have an appeal process, yes.
And then during that appeal process can go on
Yes.
for quite
The only
some
good
time.
thing I have to say is the warning letters have been very successful. A lot of places have not realized that what's going on in their shops, and they've actually taken actions to fix what they're doing. And they enter into what's called an abatement agreement with the police department and L&I to make sure that they, if it's lighting issues, trash issues, whatever it may be, the law department helps us negotiate agreements with these businesses so they stay on the straight and narrow. And if they don't, then they get right back into the hopper for the.
But we also see it where some companies or businesses would operate, get that notice, and then at the end of the day, figure, all right, I'm moving to a new location. So then they just close up shop, closed up, and now they open up somewhere else under a different name. What do we do in that case?
Well, if they, two issues there. They open up in a different shop. Now here you have to understand with the business license, correct me if I'm wrong. The business license allows me to have as many businesses as I want. It's one license. I can have 15 different locations. So I can close up the shop at K&A and just open up another shop under my same license, but I'm still accountable.
No, new license.
No, that's what I'm getting at. So you can,
Okay.
that's step one. I can do that, but that's all that information from that old place still attaches to me because I have the license. But the issue is what they know. They know that's not going to work for them. So what they'll do is they'll get another business. The business is a separate legal entity. So regardless who owns it, or like who's the manager or the owner of the corporation, the shareholders, it's considered by law a separate legal entity. So they open a new LLC, which can be done overnight. They got a new business. They file for a new license, and it's basically a clean slate. And that's what we were talking about earlier. That's the shell game they play. So they'll rack up all these penalties, all these violations, and just before they have to go to court or they're going to lose their license, they go and pop up a new one. And then basically that company then sells it to this one, and then we start the whole process over again. And then legally we have to go through the same things all over again. So that's an area to look at. That's something I think we should look at to avoid that shell game. How to impact that and how to stop that. Because that way that person, when he applies for the next license, he should be still accountable for all the issues he has under the old license. But
And-
like I said, it's not a person. These are corporations.
Would that be done legislatively?
I think we'd have to take a look at that. I'm not really sure. I think we could work it out. The issue is, the law department definitely has to be involved because these are separate legal entities under law. So assigning responsibility and liability for an old corporation to a new corporation, like I said, I know the IRS does it in certain circumstances, so it's feasible. The concept is out there. I just don't know whether the law department will be on board, but the idea is they're trying to attack a new corporation and how can we assign all the liabilities and responsibilities that they owe to this new corporation, possibly if they have, substantial number of same shareholders, or coming up with a formula. If you have 80 or 90% more of your other shareholders, you are effectively the same corporation with a new name, and maybe that's some way to take a look at this. But I think it would take, some people from the law department and some other people to figure out how we can overcome that hurdle.
Thank you. Just a point of information, Mr. Chair. So I do know that when we have, let's say, someone is fined for like garbage, right, or grass, or some of these other nuisance violations, that some of those violations can actually stay with the property. Like our water bill, right? They stay with the property. And so how can we just think of ways that we can figure out how to get these types of violations to stay with the property as well. So, thank you.
The chair recognizes Jamie Gautier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to correct the record from earlier. My exchange was with the health department. So it was the health department that, there was some difficulty getting inspectors out there, and there was more difficulty getting inspectors out there when the establishment was actually open. But, if this is an ecosystem, right, where L&I and health are working together with PPD on these issues, I do think we have to be prepared to respond. So I hope that that's something that we can look into this budget season.
The maker of the resolution, Catherine Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleagues, I wanted to get a couple other things on the record as well. One for, just going back to Councilmember Gaudier's comment, do we have a representative here from the Health Department? Okay. And then as he approaches, I wanted to just ask for clarity with Commissioner Healy. I have a bill here that I'm just waiting to introduce because I wanted to wait until after we had this hearing so that if we needed to introduce additional legislation, we can do that in conjunction with this bill, all related to this issue. But I know there are certain parts of the administrative code that have criminal sanctions for some of these businesses, but technically, L&I can't give a criminal offense, right, to a business because their licenses and inspections, but it is in our administrative code. Can you just talk about that?
Very quickly, our statute, or our ordinances are rather old, okay? So
Right.
some things on the books where you would be arrested for some of these summary violations, and theoretically, I think up to a 90-day penalty. That's not applicable any longer, quite frankly, according to the law department. I mean, so the issue is when that provision is in a statute or one of our ordinances, it complicates it because the issue of now it's criminal due process rights rather than civil due process rights.
Right.
So it makes it much cleaner if you just remove that from these ordinances and we deal with them civilly. That's how we do the short dumping, all the work we do with the short dumping. I believe those provisions were removed for that very reason. So now the nuisance, my nuisance unit is going after civilly with the law department a lot of these short dumpers as well because you removed that provision. It's actually a holdover, I think, from a long time ago.
Right, but that helps us as a city to be able to better enforce during the process for civil sanctions. Is that correct? Because I don't want people to think that we are seeking to remove any additional enforcement and or penalty from these bad business operators, but that it allows us an opportunity to clean up the code and then ensure that we have them go through the civil process as quickly as possible, in addition to some of the other changes that we are discussing today. But I wanted to get that on the record while most of my colleagues are here, because like I said, I already have that bill drafted already, it's already been reviewed. And so that'll be a part of the package of bills that I'm intending to introduce to further combat this issue. And I know we've even done the second bill in 2023 to help with the nuisance abatement plans, because we found after we did the first bill in 21 that they were skirting some of the processes around the abatement plan. So I've been taking a lot of notes and just taking copious notes really about some of the location-specific issues and some of the other challenges that we want to pull all together with this particular bill that I already have written, so that we have a package of bills to address this issue. But I wanted to put that on the record.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
And thank you so much, because you all have been great to work with, particularly Renee, for keeping that list that we have, so thank you very much. But I wanted to go back to the Health Department. I know that Councilmember Gaudier brought up the issue regarding inspector availability after hours and on weekends, so if you could just speak to that.
And can you start by just state your name for the record?
Good morning, Ben Hartung with the Department of Public Health. Councilmember, I believe that's correct that there, if we're talking tobacco enforcement, I'm not sure specifically about food enforcement, but they usually are the same sanitarians that they don't typically go out at nights and weekends. That would be correct.
But that presents a challenge in a lot of these establishments are operating pretty late. And so if, we can't be closed if they're not closed. If they're, presenting a nuisance to the community after hours, then how do we address that?
I would have to have Dawn Kieswetter, the Director of Environmental Health Services, follow up with you. I'm not sure who you communicated with, but we'd be happy to talk about how we can make
I'd love to talk more about that, especially as we are in budget season.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman?
Yeah, one of the things that keeps coming back to us is that the punishment often doesn't fit the crime. that businesses know that I'd rather run the risk of 8 years of not being inspected than pay a fine rather than pay a license. Like, I know by the time you get to me, it'll be worth it. And so therefore, I'm willing to pay. It goes for taxes. It goes for L&I inspections. It goes for health inspections. It costs more to fix what you're talking about than the fine that you might give me. We have to change that balance a bit in order to get people to comply. Second, if I know that you aren't open on the weekends or 5 o'clock you close, everything from construction, all right, let's bring the crew in at 5 o'clock when we know no one's going to come, and we have to outsmart those individuals who are trying to circumvent our process.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Just want to put on the record that there are many takeout stores in my district that don't open up until 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon purposely, knowing that there won't be folks to come around to give those types of inspections. So, I think that's something that we as a city really need to take a look at, and how we are enforcing these laws, because they really affect the quality of life of the communities.
Member Lozada?
Do we have enough staff, inspectors, to be able to support this type of work? And I'm talking about, during the day as well as during those hours where we know are problematic. Anybody? And I'm talking about health inspectors, L&I inspectors, right? You all have to go out together. I know that you all don't have authority over LCB and those folks, but is there personnel to be able to respond to some of the issues that we have?
We have a whole entire dedicated unit that goes out for these nuisance properties, so we think we're good there. We do. We think we have enough staff, and we have experts in those areas that have been going out. Actually, Renee started there. Have going out. They figure out the players. They know what's going on. They go out with the police. We coordinate with LCE. Sometimes we coordinate with health. But yeah, we are out there. And I believe that we have a good group out there. We're at capacity that we can meet the demand out there for the nuisance stuff at night.
I asked that question, Mr. Chair, because in the past, the excuse has been, we only have one team, right? And they have to cover the entire city. And we don't have it, that team is not fully staffed. And so if we're in budget season, right? If we need to look at that, if this has become an increasing problem in our city, if we need to look at that, then it's something that we should consider, right? We're having all of these issues, there shouldn't just be one team, right? The task force was created because obviously this was a huge problem, and it's only been exacerbated as a result of us kind of having a hands-off type of approach in our city. And so we should consider looking at how do we budget to create multiple teams, or at least another team that can help support the work to address what we're all experiencing across the city of Philadelphia.
Sure. Gilmore Richardson?
To Councilmember Lozada's point, I think it would be helpful for a budget, for health, for L&I, PPD, if we could receive information regarding staffing needs for inspectors for every tour, and that the tour coincides with PPD's tours. So as an example, if they're on day, evening, or night, that we have the appropriate amount of inspectors from L&I, from health, from any other city departments that are represented on the task force to mirror the schedule of PPD. Because I know when we were going out together to do the inspections, as an example, we would typically go out in the evening. And it would be light when we would start, but it'd be dark when we were finished. And they were very, very helpful to the community. And 9 times out of 10, almost every location we went to, it would be 80 to 90% of the time, they would be seized on the spot. That would be how bad, it was. Like I said, the one business I remember in particular didn't have any licensing at all. And then as an example, when we went to Councilman Driscoll's district, you remember everybody went in the one store, and we don't have any paraphernalia. They didn't have a cigarette license. So it was on health. And they said, no, we don't sell cigarettes. And then remember, I found the cigarettes in the trash can. So as we were walking in, they must have thrown the cigarette boxes in the trash can with medallions from other states, like I think it was Virginia and North Carolina. And we were ready to leave, and something just told me, just look in the trash can. And I found the cigarette boxes in the trash can. So I think if we mirror the inspector's schedule for each of the teams, maybe we have 3 teams instead of 1. 1 team for day shift, 1 team for evening shift, 1 team for night shift, and then that gives them the opportunity to, have more coverage across the city 24 hours a day.
Well, thank you, Leader. And seeing no other questions or comments from the panel, I would like to thank you for your testimony today. Ms. McDonald, will you please call the second panel we have to testify this morning on Resolution 250052?
Kate Allen, Dee Dukes, and Susan Burt Collins.
Well, thank you, panel. I don't know what order you want to go with, but whoever wants to start, please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
I'm Susan Burt Collins, and
Yeah, closer.
can you hear me? Usually I
See
don't
if you
have-
can pull a little closer.
Okay. Susan Burt Collins. I'm the president currently for a short time of Society Hill Civic Association. And I would first, because it's Society Hill Civic Association with a name that immediately makes you go, I actually looked up the derivation of the name. It was the Society of Traders, and they had a flag that sat atop the hill on Dock Street. And it was the flag of the society on the hill. And so there were tanneries and glassmakers and woodworkers, and that's what Society Hill originally was, not the place that we sometimes look askance at, including myself. So I'm here. I thought originally when I got the request and I looked at the bill, I did think it had already been passed, which it obviously has been. So I wondered, but anyhow, so what I wrote is perhaps not as relevant because I was very supportive of the bill and saying we need it even in our neighborhood, on South Street, on 4th Street, on 5th Street. There's even a store that popped up on Walnut Street at 8th that's a convenience store, and it is selling all sorts of drug paraphernalia. It used to be a jewelry store, and now it's right around the corner from Sansom Street. So it is an issue that affects all of us. South Street is really a mecca. It's a mecca for good stuff. It's a mecca for good food. It's a mecca for people all over coming to South Street. It's also a mecca for trouble. And the more of those stores that we have and the more drug paraphernalia we have in the storefronts, the more it is assumed if you're a young person, or like Councilman Jones says, this is a watering hole. I spent my life doing criminal defense in this building. Those are watering holes, and those are places where if you're a young kid, I can't do this in my neighborhood because somebody's gonna see me, but I can do it here. And you do it here, and it affects everybody. It affects the kids, and it affects the city of Philadelphia. And those of us in Society Hill, in Queen Village, Nobody wants that. That's not what Philadelphia is. And it needs to change. But listening to all this, I must say, it seems that you've got a whack-a-mole problem. So I would look at it a little, maybe from 30,000 feet and say, how do we attack it? I might sit down with the district attorney, which might not be fruitful. And Councilman O'Rourke knows my thoughts. But maybe it is, because maybe current circumstances being what they are in the country, maybe it is time to look at Philadelphia and let us take the lead both on being progressive in keeping our people safe, happy, and healthy, but also addressing the problems as they exist. And so maybe the district attorney will talk to you. And maybe there is a way to use a little bit of criminal enforcement, a little bit of a stick, but yes, the civil penalties may be the most significant, and also civil, not criminal contempt, civil contempt is apparently much more effective. And that may be and can't be pardoned. So maybe that is something that you ought to consider. It also seems that perhaps the state ought to be involved. And also maybe all these businesses that open up in one place and then another place, many of them not from Philadelphia, they're looking for opportunities. Maybe it's a stretch, but maybe RICO could be used. I wouldn't rely on the federal people because I wouldn't rely on them for anything, but I might rely on the state people. You've got a governor who wants to do something more. Maybe he could be helpful. And the state AG's office, maybe, if one business opens up in one place and another place and another place, and they're all selling illegal merchandise, that may, in fact, could be considered a racketeering influenced operation. So I think you need to get more creative than making it a zoning matter. You have the full cooperation and support of the folks in Society Hill for whatever you can do. And finally, I would point out, many of the neighborhoods you talk about, including our neighborhood, include South Street and the contiguous numbered streets, we have a business district, a business improvement district. What are they doing? Let them call and say, gee, I just noticed this business opened up. We don't know what it is. We don't know what their licensing is. That is their job. It is not the job of me or Kate or anybody else to walk up and down the street and say, oh, gee, never saw them. Let that be the job, and let the business district know that is their job. I would bet that certainly Old City probably does that. And I think that ought to be the job of any business district, not just to fill the space with whoever will be there, but to fill the space with people that you, City Council, wants to see in our city. And with that, that's all I've got to say. But thank you, and thank you for considering this. I really appreciate it.
Next panelist. And please state your name for the record.
So good morning, Chairman, Council, everyone in your respective places. My name is Dee Dukes. I am the RCO leader in the Winfield community. I'm president of the Winfield Community Neighborhood Association. I'm the vice chairman of the Philadelphia Crosstown Coalition. I'm on the board of the Mastery Charter Schools, and I'm an educator, parent, and just community leader who cares. So I'm here today on behalf of License and Inspections and the Public Safety Committees in support of resolution number 250052, to speak in support of enforcement against paraphernalia, drug paraphernalia stores. I have observed illegal drug sales in these stores, including, but not limited to, sales to minors, sales to individuals who are addicts with many years of drug and substance abuse diseases. Daily, as a community leader, I have walked the streets. I receive multiple phone calls, email complaints from neighbors about illegal sales. submitted voluminous amount of Philly 311 reports, placed multiple roll call complaints and 911 calls in real time to the 19th District for assistance when sales were taking place and public safety incidents were happening. These illegal drug sales in stores continue to present a public safety crisis in our communities and are a detriment to the quality of life, mental, emotional, and financial instability in all growing and thriving communities, primarily our Black and brown communities. Sadly, when illegal drug sales are not enforced, the perpetrator of these offenses are allowed to continue, bringing harm to the safety and financial well-being of our friends, neighbors, and our loved ones. So in my conclusion, and certainly I'm not finished because I have a few more to say, but as a very busy RCO leader, volunteering my time daily, being here today to advocate in support of this resolution, I please ask that we provide solutions for enforcement of laws that will keep our communities safe and free from drug sales, which harm our communities. So again, I am an active community leader. I walk the streets. I know these folks who are selling illegal paraphernalia and illegal drugs and whatever else they do. And it is a danger to me as a community leader because I'm targeted. We know Dee knows something about everything. And so that's a target for me. So we need laws that work. We have laws, we just need them enforced. I heard some things here today from L&I about having information displayed. I've never seen information displayed. I've never heard of a business, in my experience, a business being educated about what they should be doing and should not. I've never seen that. So if L&I is doing that, I don't know where it is. Perhaps coming out to community organizations and educating community organizations about what we should be looking for. I've never heard of the rose in the whatever, I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what it looks like. I don't. I need to be educated on what these drugs and types of drugs look like. My middle school kids will tell me different language and I have no clue on what they're talking about. So we need to be educated. Legal businesses we support. In this idea of we can't confiscate, not understanding that. Why? We confiscate bikes. We've written legislation that confiscates bikes. Why can't we confiscate it? So we have to do better with finding solutions to solve that problem. Why does it take so long? I'm not understanding that. Why does it take so long to remove bad actors? What is the process? Like, are we following along license and inspection? Are you following along and doing your job in an appropriate time period? Answer can't be yes, because if it was, these things would not be happening. There was a tour, and I do have to say thank you to our council people in our community, Councilman Jones, Councilwoman Catherine Gilmore Richardson. I have to say thank you to you because there have been stores closed down in our Winfield community, and it was because of your support and your advocacy and listening to the community that was able to happen. But my heart goes out to those neighborhoods who that's not happening. I teach in a community where this stuff would not be going on and is not going on, but I come 5 blocks away in the community where I live, and I see trash, I see drugs, I see all night long stores in communities. My heart is hurting because of that. We have to do something together to make this situation, to resolve this situation, so that we can live the type of quality of life that we want to live. And thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank all three of you for taking time early on a Monday to take your time off and come here and appear in front of us and share your thoughts so that we can get to a better solution. So I'll turn it over to panelists three. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Kate Allen, Chairman Jones, Chairman Driscoll, Majority Leader Gilmore Richardson, and members of City Council. My name is Kate Allen, and I am the president of the Queen Village Neighbors Association. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this morning about the negative effects that stores that sell drug paraphernalia are having on our communities. Many of the shops that sell drug paraphernalia also typically sell an assortment of edible or smokable products. There are 16 such places in Queen Village and Bella Vista, 10 of them just on South Street, between 2nd and 10th Streets. Why so many of these stores along one commercial corridor? Is it because one smoke shop isn't enough to meet the demands of our neighborhood, or 4 or 6 or 15? Of course not. It's because most of these establishments are a brazen, or at best, a thinly veiled illegal drug market. There's a concept in law, res ipsa loquitur, which means the thing speaks for itself. So, if the question is whether these businesses are negatively impacting our neighborhoods, just look at the way they choose to conduct themselves. Most of these establishments operate until 2 a.m., and neighbors often comment that they rarely see anyone inside. So, how is it that these places remain open, especially with so much competition? It's because they aren't paying their rent with the legal products on their first floor shelves. The sale of drug paraphernalia is prohibited along most of South Street, but it doesn't mean it's not being sold. A neighbor with a medical marijuana card broke his bong and went to South Street to find another. The first store he went into told him they weren't allowed to sell drug paraphernalia. He tried another, was told the same thing. Since there had been exactly 0 other customers in either store, he decided to try one more before giving up. He walked in, was once again the only customer, and asked the woman behind the counter if she could help. She initially refused, but grabbed him as he turned to leave. She handed him a business card, scribbled something on it, and told him to go through the curtain behind the counter. Behind the curtain were stairs leading to a basement full of people and wall-to-wall shelves of products that couldn't legally be sold upstairs. He decided whatever that was wasn't worth it, so he turned around and went home, but suddenly learning how that business was able to pay its rent. The business was raided by the State Bureau of Narcotics investigation shortly afterwards, but yet is still able to remain open because of some jurisdictional issues. This store is one of 6 that is less than 2 blocks from a Suboxone clinic, a place where those battling substance abuse disorders seek help. If the city's position is that those with this disorder are vulnerable and need to be protected, then not stopping this is counterproductive and increases their risk of harm. If a business is willing to sell illegal products to an adult, it's not a stretch that they may also be willing to sell illegal products to children. A friend told me about another smoke shop, merely blocks from here, that is a known place among the Central High School students as somewhere where they can buy products underage. She discovered this when she found out that her teenage son had taken THC gummies he bought there, products that are illegal to sell to anyone under 21. Her biggest concern was that if someone lacked the morals not to sell products like this to minors, how could she trust what was actually in them? So she had them drug tested and found that the gummies were laced with benzodiazepines, prescription medications that can be addictive and fatal. About a week after that incident, 2 teenage girls bought THC gummies from a different smoke shop, also blocks from here. Their gummies were laced with benzos, and they became so sick that they had to go to the hospital. There's an affordable housing development in Queen Village, often referred to as the Courtyard. Several parents from there have reached out to me about yet another smoke shop that's been selling products to their children, wanting to know what can be done to stop this. These establishments have demonstrated that they are willing to break the law by selling illegal products, including to kids. So what other laws are they breaking? New York City legalized cannabis in 2021, and since then, thousands of smoke shops have popped up around the city, some legally, thousands not. The city began cracking down on the illegal stores last spring. Alongside illegal cannabis and tobacco products, officials have also found stores selling illegal weapons. Mayor Eric Adams said, "We want to make it more costly to stop you from opening than allowing you to stay open." I'm often asked how there are so many of these places popping up in our neighborhoods. It's because the business model of many of these places seems to be to open up with no regards to permit or zoning, or to lie about their intent, and operate until the beleaguered and understaffed departments of LNI Health and Police are able to inspect these businesses and ultimately cease operations. The only realistic chance we have to combat this strategy and to prevent the sale of harmful and illegal products is to make it much, much harder for these places to open in the first place. I thank Majority Leader Gilmore Richardson for taking this very necessary step of looking into these businesses and implore Council to make it harder for them to open, especially near places like schools, playgrounds, and rec centers. Make it easier to inspect any ones that do open and to shut down the ones that are causing so much harm to the people of Philadelphia. Thank you.
Well, you certainly brought some revealing topics to light here. The maker of the resolution, Catherine Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all so much for coming in and testify. And really appreciate the continued community advocacy. You know, this has been an issue that we've been working on for more than 5 years at this point. And Dee, I don't know if you remember this, it really started from the tour we did on 54th Street with Councilmember Jones. That was the beginning of this process of the citywide legislation to address drug paraphernalia. And I have to put this on the record because many people probably don't realize this, but we did have one store in Councilmember Jones's district that was raided by the ATF because they were also selling guns as well out of the back of the store. And that was several years ago. And so I want to thank you all for your testimony, for the great input that you gave. I was taking copious notes on all the different follow-up steps that you all had and mentioned. And we want to make sure that we get specifically from you, Kate, and from Queen Village Neighbors Association, the addresses and the locations of the stores that you mentioned, because what I thought about when you were talking about those products was the fact that that means they're counterfeit or synthetic products. And so that will go back to the issue that we talked about earlier regarding confiscation of those products from those stores. And so if we could get the names and the addresses of those locations, that would be great. And we want to continue to work with the administration and LNI and Health regarding education for the community groups, because I heard that part as well. Because we do need to understand exactly how we can get the information to the city so that the city then knows which businesses to inspect. Because I find a lot of times that people think that we just know a business popped up. And that sounds easy, but particularly when, you know, we're traveling all across, you know, for the district members, their districts, and then for the at-large members all across the city, it's very, very hard to keep up with. As you stated, since the pandemic, it's been thousands of these locations that have popped up across the city of Philadelphia. Many of the owners are not from Philadelphia, we've been finding as well. And so we need to try to get a handle on this process. This hearing has really reinvigorated me on this issue. I know it's something that we have been working on over the last 4 years, and to the point where I had to do 2 bills just for this issue to try to help with the enforcement. And like I said, in the last 4 years, I know Councilmember Phillips and Councilmember Bass also did legislation to help with the enforcement just on this issue. So we are trying to get a handle on this. I heard a lot today that is really going to help us move forward. I do intend to introduce an additional package of bills. Like I said, I already have one bill ready from our administrative code. I think it's Title IV with the city, but at any rate, we're going to do more based on everything we heard here today and introduce a package of bills to further address this issue. And finally, we just again want to thank you all for being the community stalwarts that you are. And Dee, you forgot one title. 52nd Ward Committee person. You didn't mention that.
Yes, of course.
But Dee is on and in everything, and we thank you, and we thank each of you for coming and representing your communities. Thank you.
Public Safety Chairman Curtis Jones.
I just want to echo what Majority Leader said is thank you, guys. What struck me, Dee Dukes, that you said is they know that you're out there, and that puts you in jeopardy. And for you to be that courageous, I remember going into that store and you were running around pulling out plugs of the machines. I'm like, I don't know if I'm committed to that degree. You know, we are not Elliot Ness. But I do remember that courage and making us on, as we walked up and down 54th Street, looking at the things that were wrong, the things that create a negative commercial environment on our strips that our senior citizens have to navigate through. They got to walk through these little watering holes that we have to kind of be mindful of, because at the end of the day, they can't travel as far from milk, eggs, butter, and cheese. And the more milk, egg, butter, and cheese that are available in the neighborhood, and the less gambling machines, the less drug paraphernalia, these items are competing for shelf space. And, you know, they go with what, you know, I asked one individual that owned a shop, I said, why do you sell this? He said, because people buy it. We have to educate not only the store owners, but the consumers. Don't do it. If you bring this, this is what we get. So thank you, Majority Leader, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing this to our attention again.
Councilmember Jamardi?
On the end over here. I just too want to thank you both and thank you. I've been with you two on numerous occasions. I've also been with Ms. Dukes when, you know, her meetings can get a little vocal. Winfield, they know their stuff and they don't play around. So I know that. And Queen Village, of course, in the second ward where I came from. So I'm very familiar with what you have to deal with over there. South Street's always been a crazy place. But I just wanted to get some clarification. You said that there was a jurisdictional issue that prevented the immediate closure and penalization of the store. Can you elaborate on that?
So from what I understand is that because this particular store was rated by a state agency, the only way that it could be shut down is through the city. And there was some complexities between coordinating the enforcement between the state and the city law enforcement.
Huh. So there's some kind of disconnect, I would say.
It sounds like there's some room for coordination here.
Yeah. Maybe we should reach out to our state partners. All right, thank you so much. And again, I thank you for your service. I know it's thankless and it's not paid. So we appreciate all the hours and time you put in. So thank you so much.
Councilmember Quetzalcoatl.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate what my colleagues have said, right? Thank you for coming today. Thank you for sharing the information. I think it's extremely important to continue to share information with us as you see it, right? It doesn't matter how active we are in the community, how much we drive around, how many community meetings we get to. Sometimes this very important detailed information that can help us bring quality of life into neighborhoods doesn't get to us at those spaces for fear, right, of retaliation or for fear that someone may hear in that space what is being discussed. And so I just encourage you to continue to share the information with us as best you can. To me, it's always extremely sad to hear that young people have access as easily as they do to these things that can destroy their lives, right? Their first use can be their last use. And I think that we don't do enough to have those conversations with young people because access is so easy right now. And so I appreciate both chairmen of these two committees for bringing us together and having this conversation, and as a collective working together to figure out how we tighten up our systems, right? And how do we make our government a more common sense government? Because some of the policies and some of the legislation that is in place seem like it's a little backwards to me, right? Some of these things just seem so obvious. We should be able to fix these so quickly, but sometimes there are things or sometimes I believe that we get in our own way. And so how do we, looking forward to figuring out how we better or streamline our processes to make sure that our young people are the ones that are protected at the end of the day.
Councilmember Nicholas of Work.
Thank you. It looks like you were about to say something, Ms. D. Did you want to go ahead?
No. Oh, I just wanted to say, I don't know who's responsible, but even the packaging of this illegal drugs or whatever it is, the packaging of it looks enticing to our children. I've seen it on the ground as I clean up. Who's responsible for maybe putting some laws that it shouldn't look like candy, that it shouldn't look like enticing to our children? That's another big issue that I think we also, whoever can address it, I think that really needs to be addressed, how this packaging is looking so enticing to our children.
Thank you. I wanted to say thank you and good morning to all of you. It's good to see you all. And Susan, it's good to see you as well. Yes, indeed. Curious, in the same spirit of you all telling us so that we can be better legislators on this point, what can you tell us about, if anything at all, what city departments have told you about what they can actually do in terms of enforcement here?
I can answer that, nothing.
About their ability to combat these issues in particular?
Yeah, I haven't heard from any city department. The only ones I know that are doing something in my community are the two I just told you about. I call and do the 311, and I don't hear anything else besides that. So I haven't heard from anyone that tells me any process, no one. Go ahead, Kate.
We've had a little bit different experience in our neighborhoods. I can't thank Commissioner Greenwald. I can't thank Bridget enough for all of her support for our neighborhoods. LNI has been incredibly responsive with the limited resources that they have. So I understand that everybody wants enforcement, hearing from all the district folks about how this is a problem in their neighborhoods as well. But LNI is really short-staffed, but she's been incredible since taking over, so we appreciate that. And then the police department, they've also been incredible with everything they've been able to do for our neighborhood, so I also want to give them due credit.
So maybe not in Winfield, but certainly in Queen Village, you're getting some responsiveness. What about you, Susan?
Well, Society Hill, forgive me, I tend to focus more on South Street and 4th Street and 5th Street because that honestly is what, it's our neighborhood. It makes up, you see kids going down there on Saturday night, you see people looking for a good time, that makes sense. But I also see that South Street is a problem. It's not, as the people at the business district said, it's family friendly. I don't see it always as family friendly. And what we have found, and Kate is always really polite, and I'm not as polite, we would ask for enforcement, and we would say, there was stores opening up, and we did, before Ms. Greenwald was in charge, we did get the answer that, well, we don't go there. We go there at 3 o'clock and they're closed. Well, they're closed because it's a nighttime establishment. So I think they need more resources. Absolutely, we need more resources for LNI, but LNI can't simply be, take it off the shelves, put it under the desk, and when they walk out the door, put it back. I mean, that's absurd. I think the statute that covers LNI needs to change. And that may be that's a heavy lift, and law department needs to get involved and all that. But you can't simply, it's like getting a parking ticket. Come on. I'm going to park there for 35 minutes and it's 20 minutes. It's okay. We can't do that. This is too serious. This affects who we are as a city. And I think we need to do better. I think health department, and then we get this mix we've had with, well, the health department came in, but they couldn't do anything, but then LNI, but then the health department had to come back, and no, this ought to be like a team effort. This is, and health is affected by what they sell in the stores. There's also an issue that a long time ago I learned apparently tobacco licensing is a state issue, how many tobacco licenses can be in one area is based upon population. Well, obviously, Center City has a lot of people. And so South Street, they all congregate there because we have the most tobacco licenses. Maybe that's a state issue and we need to limit it. So I think unfortunately, it looks like one of those task force things that you really need to look at the whole thing and look at all the pieces. Because I don't think to simply look at L&I and say, where are you? We need more than L&I, and I think we do need the police. And honestly, we need to make some examples. We need, they take people off the street by masked men and, walking down the street in Boston. Maybe they could do that to somebody, on South Street that's selling drugs to kids. And it might have an effect if you see, honestly, a bust happening. Those stores might begin to say, you know what, this ain't fun. We don't want to be in this neighborhood anymore.
It is your conviction, though, that as it relates to city departments in terms of what they can actually do in terms of enforcement, that there should be more staffing as it relates to L&I.
Absolutely, there needs to be more staffing. Yes.
Thank you.
And staffing that includes community leadership. Like I think these task forces or that L&I might have, they have to include community leaders to, report what is happening, to come up together with ideas about solutions, even helping with doing whatever work might be necessary, not doing their jobs, but working along with them to combat the problem. You have legal experience. I do. You have experience. And so those task force or working along with L&I need to include community leaders.
Thank you all so much. And again, thank you for your advocacy in your communities, for giving voice to these issues. Obviously, it helps. As we say in movement, God bless you, brother. As we say in movement, this is what democracy looks like. So thank you very much for your advocacy.
Councilmember Kendra Brooks.
Thank you. First, I want to say thank you, ladies, for just being brave advocates, community organizers, gathering all the information, and being willing to share and put yourself at risk by doing so. I understand that. I've been there. I appreciate the work that you guys are doing. I also was wondering, kind of on the same lines of Councilmember O'Rourke, have you seen any improvements in enforcement since this bill was passed?
So yes. As Councilmember Richardson was speaking about in 2021, 2020, somewhere around that time period, they were able to come in and rally community leaders, and we had a tour. Mm-hmm. And that tour, from that time to this time, we have seen 2 stores in our community shut down. And for whatever those reasons are, they're no longer operating. And they were doing some really, really illegal things. There is still one store that is just oh my goodness, is horrifying. That is still open, it's still operating. So we've seen improvement, but our neighbors are still scared to come out. Our neighbors are still scared to visit other locations within the community, and so we need something done. But yes, improvement has happened, but we still have so long to go because they are there 24 hours, trash, illegal activities going on, paraphernalia, you name it, they're doing it. So it's just continuing, but we have seen some improvement.
Thank you. And then my other thought around that, you ladies can share if you have something too before I move on to my next point.
Yes, we have, sorry, one of these days I'll get the hang of how close to get to this. We have seen some improvement, and again, from the Department of L&I, one quirk that we've seen is that there is a city law that I think was passed around the same time as the other one that prohibited the sale of drug paraphernalia and tobacco within 500 feet of several protected schools, rec centers, daycare centers, and houses of worship. And of the 16 smoke shops that are in Queen Village, it seemed like at least 11 of them were issued permits erroneously by the health department. So we really appreciate Commissioner Greenwald's leadership, and Councilman Squilla has been incredibly helpful on this, and with the police department, trying to clean up what seemed like permits that, at least to us, weren't issued appropriately. And again, they're near places, especially our schools, where we're all trying to protect our kids in these places that at least a few of them have been marketing to them. So since the leadership that we've been able to work with and these new law changes that are already on the books that we appreciate, we have seen an improvement.
You must have been reading my mind, because that was the direction I'm going in. And this is for folks that are on the education committee. We get countless reports directly from the school district of children with various, taking some kind of drugs or distributed candy or whatever. Is there any way that we can kind of marry these efforts with all of these? Because I don't think the school district would necessarily reach out to LNI that they think they got the kids got the candy or the gummies or whatever they had from one of the neighboring stores, and add that same ordinance, because in neighborhoods like mine and Jeffries and some other folks, there's still like smoke shops on the way to children's schools, or they're selling it in a corner store. Even Jimmy, like some of the, when I said the more challenged neighborhoods, those things are overlooked. Is there a way that we can work with LNI to enforce those same level of the legislation that Mark's been able to carry out with the schools in the district around the city, and connect it to some of these incidents that we get, what, every other day about somebody's
Yes.
kid did something at school?
Point of information, thank you, Councilmember Brooks. L&I and Health are now coordinating. I don't know if L&I wants to come up and state that, but they are now coordinating with the Health Department, and it's good to have Health on these conversations also. I know they're not present here today, but, all right, there you go, I'm sorry. They are now coordinating, working together so that Health Department isn't issuing permits for people who do not have zoning. I don't know, does somebody want to just come up and explain what you're doing at this point?
On the same block as a smoke shop. Smiley's, same block. So yeah, I'd like to hear that.
Bridget Collins, Greenwald, Department of Licenses and Inspections, Quality of Life. Yes, when this issue first arose, we did not realize that there was a contradiction there, like we were not issuing license, they were issuing licenses, not permits. We have complete coordination now, so this will not happen going forward. So we picked up on that a few months ago. So yeah, we've been working on that.
Member Lozada?
Just one question for LNI. We had a hearing the other day, and someone mentioned something about the Health Department and LNI, and I want clarification for future meetings that I'm going to be attending. But they were talking about the sales of some of these items as well as tobacco, right? And they're saying LNI, well, the state gives us a permit, the state gives us a license, LNI gives us, the Health Department gives us a permit, LNI then does some enforcement. Is there any type of coordination in all of that?
Yeah, so we coordinate very often with, like I said earlier, the police department and the health department. That issue's different. We enforce this drug paraphernalia. The health department enforces the tobacco. So we refer things to each other, so that's where the...
And when you all are doing inspections in these establishments, understanding that some of these smoke shops, some of these corner stores, there's a language barrier, are there inspectors in each inspection that is able to translate and interpret what is happening and what is going on?
We have translation services. We have inspectors that speak multiple languages, and all of our information is in practically every language that someone would speak in the city.
Okay. And when a violation is issued in a inspection like this one, are violations issued immediately on location, or are they then mailed to, or are they mailed to the person? Because one of the things that we heard was that violations are issued, or there's a violation issued that doesn't get to the establishment for months after.
So a violation is one thing that's issued and it does go through so a case is written in our Eclipse system and then it goes out through the mail. I think it gets emailed as well. I'm pretty sure, but I'd have to double check on that. A site violation notice is issued right on site.
Okay, thank you.
Leader?
And again, I just wanted to put this on the record. Are we able to continue or restart the tours that we were doing? I would say I think we last did them in 23. I know we started, I think, in the 4th in Councilmember Jones's district. But to restart the tours, maybe for each district council member, they can identify corridors in their areas, and then, that way the community also sees. And that was an opportunity for us to invite the community leaders to the tour. So we had the district council person, and all the various leaders from each of the city departments that have the authority to either seize the business or check for the tobacco licensing. And obviously, and then I was there as well, because it was the bill that we have been working on together. But it gave us an opportunity to educate the community about how they can report these violations, but also focus on corridors that the district council members were hearing from their community members were the worst in their district. So I was wondering if we could look at the possibility of doing the tours again and then maybe get through every single council district this time, because I think we stopped after that really bad one in the 5th, because we were surrounded by drug dealers that night. It was dark, and they were really angry that we closed the store, because the store was where they did all of their business, the one store that didn't have any licensing, and they were really, really upset with us and surrounded us that night. And it was okay, because I went complete mom on all of them, and we went back to that location within Council President Clark and did a job there right on the corner with a bunch of gazebos. But I think we need to do a little bit more of that to ensure that the community has the information necessary to continue to report. So I wanted to put that on the record too.
So we do tours. So we went to each district council person, starting in June of this summer. We hit every council district. We asked the district council members, where was their hot spot, and that is where we went. So I know Frankfurt Avenue, we went to a council member Driscoll, we were on Kensington Avenue, on Wyoming Avenue with Councilwoman Lozada, Councilman Jones, I think yours was 54th Street, I believe. Yeah, so we went to each individual council person. Some of them came out and walked with us. I think Councilmember Driscoll's, we did pick a 105-degree weather day and did that, so that was terrible, but we did it. We walked all through Frankfurt Avenue, but community leadership groups too. So we've completed 12 already since June. So what we do is we go out, and then we give all the education, and like I said, it's in the various languages, it's in multiple languages. We bring the Commerce Department out, so the Commerce Department can talk to these businesses and say, hey, the Mayor's Business Action Team is available to you. Here's what a facade grant is. Here's where we can help you. Then we go back, LNI, QOL, without Commerce, because we're doing the enforcement and like good cop, bad cop, like kind of scenario a little bit. And then that's when the enforcement happens. So we've completed 12 to date since June. We are more than willing to, go add on, you know what I mean? Some of them, we've had some businesses that have come in compliance, some that are in court. All of them are in different aspects of where the enforcement effort is now, right? Some came in compliance, some were re-inspected, some were issued ceases. I think we did about 60, almost 70 ceases, like immediately. Some intent to ceases, things are in court. So things are moving. So we'd absolutely do that. The more the merrier.
I want to support what the Deputy Commissioner just said, because, in my district, they went out for a few weeks in a row to educate residents and businesses and tell them, we're coming back to do an inspection, right? We're coming back within an X period of time, and we're coming to do an inspection. I went out with a team that was doing enforcement. And when we talked to some of the owners, I asked them, did you receive education information? Did someone visit you to tell you that that enforcement was going to be happening. And many of them were very honest and said, yes, they were here, they did educate us, and we weren't ready because we didn't believe they were coming back, which is the conversation that the woman who was operating the restaurant said to us, right? She said, I continue to operate. I bought the business and I bought the building off of this person. I didn't feel like I needed to transfer or do anything because L&I and Health Department has never been in here. And so I didn't feel like, yeah, they said they were gonna come back, but they've never come back. And so I didn't feel like I needed to do anything or I needed to act. And so just wanna say thank you to you all for that increased education that we continue to give some of the businesses in our community. But at some point, you know, we have to do enforcement because the lack of enforcement is costing us more. And it's costing us more than just that dollar amount, right? It's costing quality of life. It's costing some of our children, young people's lives. It's costing some of our senior citizens not to feel like they can come out and visit some of our establishments in our community. It's costing young people witnessing some of this activity that is occurring in their community. And so at what point do we say that all of those things, when compared to that line item, that budget number, when do we say that all of these other things should be prioritized over that budget number, right? We really have to take a serious look at how our city is being operated and how we as government are responsible for ensuring that, yes, we welcome businesses, but businesses that are conducting business appropriately. When are we going to say that our children, you know, are worth more than a government that ignores this type of activity happening in their community? We really have to change how we're prioritizing and how we're conducting business as a government in the city of Philadelphia. It's not that we're not small business supporters, absolutely not, right? But we have to figure out how do we help those businesses come into compliance in a way where they are contributing to the economy of those neighborhoods and still protecting quality of life.
Okay, well, I'm very pleased with the content of this hearing today. I think we had a lot of good things on the record. The maker of the resolution, Majority Leader Catherine Gilmore Richardson, thank you for your continuing efforts. On behalf of Chairman Curtis Thomas and myself, we'd like to thank the panelists. Oh, I'm sorry, Kurt. That's right, he's playing basketball somewhere. Coaching basketball. Chairman Jones, would like to thank you, panel, and the earlier panel for this very worthwhile testimony, so thank you. Sure. So hearing no further questions from members for this panel, and there being no other panels to testify, we will now transition to our public comment session. Ms. McDonald, will you please call the first person making public comment we have to testify this morning on the bill before this committee today?
There are no names for public comment.
There are none?
None.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ms. McDonald. Seeing that there are no other testifiers in public comment today, I will. All right, let's see. Well, I also ask if there's anyone else present in this hearing whose name we have failed to call or that wishes to offer testimony on the resolution being considered today. Hearing none, and there being no further questions from members of the committee, no other witnesses to testify, and no further names for public comment, this concludes the business before the Joint Committees on Licenses and Inspection and Public Safety today. Thank you all very much for your attendance.